It's nice to be here. Thanks for coming, getting up early. So I wanted to start this morning by thinking about what happens when we meet people for the first time. So you guys, I'm sure this week have met a lot of people for the first time. And typically what happens is we introduce ourselves by name, and then we look for common ground. So we ask people, where are you from? Or we ask them, where did you go to school? And we look for this common ground. And typically what happens with me is, especially here in the Bay Area, people say, where do you work? Actually, in Ireland, where I'm from, people are like, where are you from? What town are you from? And here it's like, where do you work? And people say, where do you work? And I say, I work at Facebook. And they say, well, that's pretty cool. I say, and their eyes light up. And this is before they get into the rant about what's wrong with it. And they ask me, what do you, I say, yeah, that's pretty cool. I like it. I like working there. And they ask me, what do you do there? And I say, well, I work on ads. And normally people say, like their face just drops, and they're like, it's like I've come last in the race. And they say, like, oh, well, maybe in a few weeks you'll move on to something better. The thing about it is I wanted to work on ads. Like when I first started talking to Facebook about moving there, I asked, I want to work on ads. They're like, what do you want to do here? Do you want to work on identity? Do you want to work on relationships? I was like, no, I want to work on ads. And the reason I wanted to work on ads is because I wanted to work on the theme of influence. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. I think it's very exciting. I think we're because of the social web, we're in a position where we can start to make advertising and marketing much more meaningful and relevant for people. We're moving away from this world where people are trying to push stuff and push messages, and into a world where we're getting stuff because we gave permission to people. So this is me, so you can tweet to your heart's content. And this is the three things that I want to talk to you guys about. So the first is that the web has been rebuilt around people. The second is that people live in networks. And the third is that networks determine how people are influenced. So these are the three main things. So the first one, the web has been rebuilt around people. So this is a kind of very rough schematic of the web, the kind of evolution of the web. It's gone left of center. I'm not sure why that is. On the very far left, your far left corner is kind of Web 1.0. Basically, a bunch of documents all linked together. Typically companies got their marketing material, literally copied and pasted it, and put it on a website. The second part is a phase where things were kind of bolted on. So like the early versions of Blogger, YouTube, when a lot of people think about social today, and I'm going to show you some examples, they bolt it on. They kind of like shoehorn it in to what they already have. And what I'm going to advocate for is this third era, which at Facebook we call it social by design. You can call it the social web. But basically, the web has been rebuilt around people. People are at the center, and the content will orient around the people. So I'm going to show you some examples to make this more concrete. So this drives everything that we do at Facebook. We think about social by design all the time. This is like one of our core tenets. And what this basically means is that we need to design things around people. We need to design things around people at the center. So when we think about how to build stuff, when I say that we should not focus on technology, I know that here at UX Week I'm like preaching to the converted. You guys are not advocates for technology first. But we should also not put content first. And a lot of places do put content first. They have a lot of content, and that's what things get oriented around. And I'm saying that we should orient them around people. So I'm going to walk through some examples of things that I think are social by design and things that are not, things that are bolted on. So this is the first example. When Facebook Photos was being developed, the team put together this spreadsheet. And it's basically the competitive landscape. So you can see file sizes, all different file sizes supported by all these different things. And like the list is huge. Like these were all the Photos product on the market a few years ago, all doing pretty well. Facebook Photos, when it launched, had none of these features. It supported far less file formats. It had really crappy resolution. You couldn't edit photos. You couldn't rotate them or crop them or fix red eye. Like all of those, it didn't have any of those things. But it did have one thing, the ability to tag people. And that's what people cared about. And that's why Facebook photos skyrocketed beyond all the other photos product. Turns out that when people take photos, they're taking them because of the other people in them. They're not taking beautiful sunsets. They're not the photos people care about. The photos most people care about are photos like me asleep at a bar. I was taking a break. So actually, some Irish friends of mine came to visit, and there was a lock-in, which basically means the bar doors shut and you stay inside. You're not let out after it closes. It took some Irish people for me to have my first San Francisco lock-in. But people care about these photos, right? They care about what I'm doing. It kind of gives an insight into my life. My friends came to visit. Other friends that weren't here were able to see it. This is what people cared about. It's a terrible photo. No one's white face at the front, really dark background. It's a terrible quality photo. But it's the photos that people care about. This photos product is social by design. So here's another example. This is Call of Duty, which is a pretty amazing game. And the gaming community in general are doing amazing stuff, creating these really rich, immersive experiences. So here's another game, which does not look as immersive or cool. It looks like it was designed in the 1990s, and it's far more popular than the other one. This is Cityville. Cityville has 110 million users. Call of Duty sold 20 million copies. And Call of Duty is very successful. 20 million is a lot. It's a lot of money. It's very profitable. But it's nowhere near the number of people who play Cityville. There's only 55 million Xboxes in the world. There's only 87 Wiis in the world. Cityville has more users than those consoles. So here's another example. This is TripAdvisor. I'm sure you're very familiar with this experience. You're on the web, you're traveling, you're looking for somewhere to go, and you're trying to figure out if a hotel is good or a location is good. And here you can see a review. There's a reviewer. You may or may not know who they are, and so you're not sure whether you can trust them or not. And TripAdvisor plugged in Facebook and got this. This was them trying to rebuild their site around people. And suddenly the experience has completely changed. It's changed from me looking at a bunch of strangers, pseudonyms. I'm not sure who they are. Are they like me? Do they travel like me? Do they like what I like? I like small hotels. Do they like big, fancy hotels? I don't know. But I know Hunter, and I know that he stayed there, and his review isn't very informative, but I can reach out to him, and I can say, hey, Hunter, you stayed here. Is this good? Is this a good place for me to go? And not only will he tell me it's a great hotel, he'll also tell me that there's a great noodle bar down the street, and there's a great restaurant around the corner, and you got to go see this park. And that is an entirely different and better experience than the last experience where we just looked at the reviews. So this is ASOS. This is a UK e-commerce site. Some of you may be familiar with it. If you look at this site and think to yourself, what is it? Like, shopping is a very social experience. When we go and buy clothes, we usually go with friends, and we usually ask people's opinion. There's a huge trend of people taking pictures of themselves wearing clothes in dressing rooms and sending them to their friends. What do you think? Does it make me look fat or thin? All this has is a bunch of buttons at the bottom. Tweet, like, send, +1. Right? And this is how most people think about social. They think, oh, we need to add buttons. Get the buttons on the site, and we're good. And this is fundamentally the wrong way to think about this. It turns out that ASOS actually have a really big community, really great community going on. These are collections of things that people put together. And if you dive into one of them, you can see down in the bottom left, there's a bunch of comments. And there's people here that they've created a profile. They've curated this stuff. Other people have come along and commented on it. But if we drill into the ring up at the top right, one of the products in that collection, there's nothing on the ring page about all of that community. It's been completely bolted on the side and hasn't been integrated. And I'm sure there's lots of good reasons why ASOS did this. Mostly, it was easier to engineer, easier to implement. But it's not a social experience. You would just have these buttons down the bottom. So here's another example, Airbnb. I don't know if any of you guys have stayed in an Airbnb house. It's a pretty cool experience. What's amazing to me about Airbnb is that we had couch surfing, which was basically you go and stay on other people's couches, and in the back of your head, no matter what, you're thinking, is this guy weird? Is he going to take me out in the town and show me a great night, or is he going to spy on me? And this is what people cared about. And Airbnb did something interesting where they hooked this up to the social graph with Facebook, and suddenly you can see that Steph is friends with the host. That's completely different. Hey, Steph, is this guy weird? Right? And she's going to tell you, no, he's awesome. You should definitely stay with him, and he's going to show you a good time. And that's an entirely different and better experience. Here's New York Times. Whole bunch of rich content on the site that a bunch of editors in New York spend a lot of time curating and trying to figure out what people care about. This is not necessarily social in any way. There's no social behavior here. But if you go into, one of the pages, one of the articles, they have this kind of like bolted on thing going on over here. Latest in my network. And immediately, 2 to 3 of those stories are more interesting than all the stuff on the front page. That's because my friends read them. They may not be interesting articles in themselves, but I care because my friends read them. And I'm like, oh, why is Jane reading that? I should check it out. Here's the Huffington Post. This isn't the Huffington Post homepage. This is just a kind of other experience they've built around people. But this is a news page that's built around people and what they've read. And if you look at it, these are all the articles in the last few hours that people in my network have read. To me, this is a much better news experience. Like, it turns out, so when I talk about this stuff, and I used the example in the workshop yesterday, news is fascinating to me because I did work at the BBC and The Guardian many years ago, and the reason people buy newspapers, the reason they buy one newspaper instead of another newspaper, is because they already agree with what they're about to read. They're like, yep, I'm left, I buy The Guardian, because I know what they're going to say is what I already agree with. But that's not what people really care about. It's not what they share. They don't share, there's something happening in Libya. They don't share that stuff. They share, cat got stuck in a tree, this celebrity's having an affair. That's the stuff they share. Sad but true. So here's Etsy. Imagine a scenario where I'm trying to buy a gift for my brother Neil. It's his birthday. So I hit Etsy. Etsy's an awesome site. It's a site, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. People can make stuff and sell it on Etsy. Very craft-oriented. So if I look at this is Etsy's homepage, and they have this thing where people curate things, and this collection up the top right, it's picked by Mary Star Designs. And when I look at this, like, what is Neil, my 27-year-old, like, hipster brother, like? And he's not going to like the cushion down in the bottom right. He's probably not going to like the thing in the bottom left. At least to my knowledge, he wouldn't like that. Especially, it would be pretty weird if I bought it for him. But if you scroll down on Etsy, down in the bottom left there's a thing called gift ideas. And this is kind of bolted on, but I think it's an amazing social experience, and I think this should be the core of their site. If you click gift ideas, you get this page. You can choose a Facebook friend, and you can type in people's names. So there's Neil. So I type in Neil, I hit OK, and suddenly the homepage changes, and it's all the stuff Neil has liked on Facebook and all of the products on Etsy that match those likes. Suddenly, there's a whole ton of stuff here that Neil would like. This is a much better experience, and it's just built around people and their friends. This is the last example I've got. This is Ticketmaster. This only came out a couple of days ago, so the screenshots are a bit ropey. I copied them off the web. Ticketmaster are building this integration with Facebook, which is simple and obvious. When you go and buy tickets on Ticketmaster, it shows you which of your friends have bought tickets and where they're sitting. That is dead simple. I see a story in my newsfeed. Hey, your friend is going to the sports game. I click it. Oh, and he's sitting there. Buy the seat next to him. That's much better than all trying to randomly coordinate. Where are you sitting? What row are you in? How much was your ticket? All that. It's a very hard experience. This is much, much better. So you can see it there. That's kind of what it looks like. So the web's been rebuilt around people. I think it's a fundamental truth. It's going to impact all of us. There's a fundamental re-architecture. The evidence of this is everywhere. All of these sites, all of these people and businesses are rebuilding things and trying to re-architect things around people and identity and connections. So the interesting question for me was, why? Why are we rebuilding the web? The web works okay. Why are we rebuilding it around people? And this is a very crude, simple answer. I tend to oversimplify things. So the reason is that social networks are not new. Social networks have existed for as long as we've existed. So, in the early days of humanity, we roamed the savannas, avoiding lions and, probably killing each other as well and trying to stay alive. And about 10,000 years ago, we first formed villages, Neolithic villages. There were about 150 to 2,000 inhabitants. 2,000 years ago, which is a lot less than 10,000 years ago, so for 8,000 years, people were living in these villages and communities. 2,000 years ago was the Roman Empire, very advanced civilization, advanced legal structure, advanced social norms. It was appropriate to act one way and not another way. That's 2,000 years ago. The internet is only 20 years old. So all that's happening is we're catching up. The web is catching up with all of the stuff that we do. When you think about the social web, I think the social web will just become the web, because social isn't something that we like, oh, time to be social, and we go and be social, right? It's just built into us. It's hardwired into us. And it's going to become hardwired into the experiences that we have. What's interesting to think about, and I think it's very important for this community to think about, is that although the technology changes really, really fast, like a lot of these companies, like Zynga didn't exist a few years ago, Foursquare didn't exist a few years ago, these companies are coming up really fast, and the technology is changing really fast, but our behavior is not changing fast. It's changing really, really slowly. And in many cases, our behavior is driven by evolution that happened 5,000 or 10,000 years ago. Like we go into a store and just trying to figure out what cereal to buy, and our decision has been informed by something that happened 10,000 years ago when we were trying to avoid lions. Right? That's what's happening. Our brain has been evolving for tens of thousands of years, and that's not going to change within our lifetime. So behavior is changing really slowly. Maybe it will change in our lifetime if we have chips implanted in our brains, but that's a weird world. Let's not talk about that. Let's assume that doesn't happen. So I think the best way to talk about social is that it's a way of thinking. This is what I often hear. What's our social strategy? What's our Twitter strategy? What's our Facebook strategy? And usually the answer is, get those buttons and add them on. This is fundamentally the wrong way to think about this. Fundamentally the wrong way. The best analogy that I have for thinking about this is that social is like electricity. So when you think about designers at Apple designing the MacBook, they don't even think about electricity. It's not like, what's the electricity experience of our MacBook? It's like, it just works. It's part of it. It's the hub. It's the thing that's driving all the other things. And we need to think about social in the same way. Social behavior is a thing that drives all of our decisions, and it needs to be the thing that we build into our products, bake it in, build it around people. So the web's been built around people. Why is this important to you? This is why. People turn to their friends to make decisions. Business says, you got to buy our stuff. Person turns to friend, should I buy that? Like, don't buy that. We don't buy it. This is increasing. So, historically, people on the web looked at businesses, looked at websites, consumed information. They may or may not have believed what people were saying, whether they were credible or not. A lot of it came down to very creative advertising and marketing copy around whether you could persuade people. And that's changing. We've always looked to our friends offline. We've always turned to our friends for advice. And now it's starting to happen online as well. And this is going to fundamentally change a lot of the businesses you guys work in. Here's an example. This is Timbuktu, local San Francisco bag company. I'm sure many of you have got Timbuktu bags. I should disclaim my wife works at Timbuktu, so that just makes them better. So this is their homepage, and over on the left is a review. They've put this review on the homepage. I think that's really interesting, right? They're trying to rebuild this thing around people. Like, I don't know who that person is today, but in the future, I will. I will know which of my friends has Timbuktu bags. Which of them bought this bag? Do they like it? Did they return it? Assuming that we give our friends permission to see this data, this is the experience we're going to have. These are the e-commerce retail experiences. We will know what our friends have bought, what they've done, where they've gone, and what they thought. And we'll have really good tools to reach out to them and ask them for more information. So I made this slide black because it's so serious. It's the most serious slide. You need to do this. You need to reorient your business around people, because if you don't, someone else will. EA are scrambling to acquire social gaming companies because Zynga are eating their lunch. This is going to happen to a lot of other companies, a lot of other verticals. So there's only one way to do this, which is to understand what motivates people to behave in the way that they do. Understand behavior and don't focus on technology. I'm sure you got this is music to your ears. I think it's interesting to think about how we think about this at Facebook. We don't think about posts or comments or shares or likes or like buttons. We think about infrastructure. Facebook is infrastructure. It's the container. It's the container of content. It's the thing that's just helping all the other stuff to happen. Like, we do spend a ridiculous amount of time arguing about pixels of what a share dialogue should look like, but it's not how we think about the company and the business and what its mission is. We see it as infrastructure. So that's the first section. The web has been rebuilt around people. People change much slower than technology, and we need to understand what motivates people to behave in the way that they do. So the second thing, people live in networks. This is interesting. We always think about people and assume that they live in isolation, independent actors. All of the business models we have, all of the consumer behavior models we have are like, well, people are very rational, and they look at all the options, and then they narrow it down, and they pick one, and they buy it. That's not what happens at all. We live in networks, everywhere, in cities. And this is increasing as more and more people live in cities. Commuting, on our smoke break, shopping, eating dinner, our hobbies, having coffee. We are surrounded by people. We live in networks. So what do these networks look like? I think this is very complicated, and all of this stuff is pretty complex, and I'm trying to simplify it to give you guys some actionable things which you can actually figure out what you should draw and what you should build. People have multiple independent groups of friends. People have different types of relationships, and the independent groups are connected by individuals. So the independent groups are connected by individuals, and the people who connect the groups are not special. So let me dive into each of these. This first part, how our network is structured, basically peoples? Oh, need a spell checker, grammar checker. People have sets of relationships that increase by a factor of 3. And this is what it looks like. In the middle, you've got five closest friends. These are your circle of trust, the people you turn to in times of need. If you need to borrow money, if you need someone to mind your kids, this is who you turn to. And family is disproportionately represented in the 5. 15 is the sympathy group, which is a really morbid way that social psychologists describe this group. It's basically the people whose death would devastate you. That's about 15. The next group is 50. This is people who you know what's going on in their life. 150, I'm going to talk about in a little more detail later on. It's people that you're generally feeling like you're staying in touch with. Then there's another group of around 500, which is people that we know and recognized. And obviously, we've met many more than 500 in our life, but we don't necessarily recognize them. You all have the experience where you're somewhere and someone comes up like, oh my God, how are you? I haven't seen you in ages. And you're like, who is this person? And this happens. We know that this happens. So people have multiple independent groups of friends. So this is what it looks like. People have groups, they're very small, and they're independent. So the people, my university friends, don't know my family. And if I lived in Chicago for a few years, my Chicago friends don't know my university friends. And I'm sure if you think about your life and think about the groups that you've built up over time, this will hold true for the most part. We have a small number of groups, typically 4, sometimes up to 6, and the people in the groups don't know each other. There's lots of examples where people try to merge these groups. Wedding is one. Anyone here married? Well, I'm sure lots of people here are married. Do you remember trying to figure out who was going to sit where at your wedding? Like, nightmare. Very stressful scenario. Your crazy college buddy, your very conservative religious aunt. Like, keep them apart. We don't want these worlds to collide. And this is true. We keep these groups apart because it just makes things simpler. And the groups are built over these 3 things. They're built over life stages. They're built over shared experiences, like if we live in the same place, if we worked in the same place for a while. And they're built over hobbies. When we look at Facebook data and look at groups, we basically see the same thing. These are the most common names for groups on Facebook. Family, best friends, roommates, high school, all of the things that we just saw. So the next thing is that people have different types of relationships. This is stating the obvious. We're closer to some people than we are to others. If we look at this and look at just one of these groups, New York friends, we're closer to these 2 people than we are to the rest. They're our closer friends. But they're not necessarily who we turn to when we ask for advice from our New York friends. This friend travels well. I'm going to ask her about hotels. That guy is a real foodie. He eats well. I'm going to ask him about good restaurants. So this is our structure. This is one of the most helpful diagrams I've found in explaining social behavior to people. Independent groups. So one really good way of describing this is strong ties, weak ties, and temporary ties. I'm only going to talk about strong ties and weak ties today. But this is a really helpful structure to think about the relationships that we have with other people and whether we're designing for different types of relationships. We should be designing for strong ties or weak ties. Designing for both just ends up in a crazy, complex, very vague experience. So strong ties. Strong ties are our circle of trust, the people we care about the most, the people we have intimate relationships with. And we want to guess how many strong ties the average American has. 3. That's pessimistic, but close. 4. It's very small. There's only 4 people. When people say, this is my circle of trust, and these guys are in it, it's only 4. How many people per week does the average Facebook user communicate with directly? That's likes, comments, instant messages, posts on their wall, private messages. And this is Facebook users who are continual, they return almost every day. How many people do you think they communicate with per week? 4. It's very, very small. We're communicating with very small numbers of people. Per month is 5. I had to count there for a second. And this is true across lots of things. There's lots of other research. 80% of phone calls are to the same 4 people. So when we think about groups on Facebook, most of the time people think about sports teams. The groups are pretty big. But actually, when we look at how many people are in a group on average, it's 8. It's very small. Turns out we're using these groups to communicate with very small sets of people. So that's strong ties. Let's talk about weak ties. Weak ties are people we don't know so well, friends of friends, people we met recently. Some of these weak ties can become strong ties over time. It usually takes years. Some of our strong ties can drift out and become weak ties, and that usually takes years as well as we lose touch with people. This number is fascinating to me. Some people call it Dunbar's number. Robin Dunbar, the anthropologist, did a lot of research on this. We basically can only hold in our heads 150 relationships. And this is a physiological limit. And it's not going to change within our lifetime. So even though people say, oh, I've got 800 friends on Facebook. Really? Do you really have 800 friends? Or is it just 800 mostly random people that you met at a party and were forced to connect with because you thought it was going to be really awkward if you didn't and met them again? When we ask people what's going on in other people's lives, who is that person? Does he know him? Do they know each other? It's 150. That's generally the limit. When we look at how many friends people have on Facebook on average, it's really, really close to this number. I don't know, is this a coincidence or is it correlated or causal? I don't know, but it's close. 130 to 170 is the average number of friends on Facebook. When you think back through time, Robin Dunbar's done a lot of writing about this. This number comes up again and again. Neolithic villages used to split in 2 when they reached 150. And that was because there was no longer a structure where people were, there was like social pressure to act in a certain way. People started acting not in the interests of the community when it went beyond 150. Same was true for the Roman army. It was split into units of 150 because the people would then know who their other people in their unit were, and I'm assuming they'd die for them, or they'd support them. And it's true online as well. Wikipedia articles being edited, when the editors reach 150, basically all hell breaks loose. It becomes chaotic. People start arguing and fighting, and it becomes cliquey. Up to 150, it's productive, because we all know who the other people are, and we can keep them in our heads. So we've up to 15 strong ties, up to 150 weak ties, and we're closer to some people than we are to others. So the independent groups are connected by individuals. So if we look at this structure, this person in the middle is the only person connecting these groups. And if you think about the groups in your life, think about if you went to college, your college friends. Think about your hometown friends. Think about friends you've made in the city that you live in now. They probably don't know each other, and you're probably the only person on Earth who connects them. The people who are connecting all these groups together are not special. They're just you and I. So if we look at this in a bit more detail, zoom in here, I'm going to remove the detail and spread this out so you can see it. This is this person's kind of 10 strongest ties. Well, this friend has 4 independent groups as well. So does this friend. They have 4 independent groups. And this friend, all of them have 4 independent groups. This thing starts to scale exponentially. So when we think about influence and how messages spread, they just spread through regular people, just like us, to people like us, to our friends, to their friends. It's pretty amazing when you look at the numbers. If there's an average of 130 friends on Facebook, you have approximately 8,000 friends of friends and 1 million friends of friends of friends. I'm sure most of you guys have more than 130 friends, and it's even greater than 1 million. And this is very conservative. This is accounting for 50% overlap in people. So the people who connect these groups are not special. And this is something that I get very passionate about when people talk about influencers. The people who connect groups are not special. So if we have 10 strong ties, and if they all told their 10 strong ties about something, a product to buy, a business to support, an experience to attend, a brand that they should be involved with. If they tell 10 and they tell 10, that's 10,000 people who've been told by someone they trust, not a blogger, not a random friend, someone that they trust deeply. So people live in networks. Their networks are made up of small connected groups, and the people who connect the groups are not special. So what does this all mean for all of us? Well, it's important because networks determine how people are influenced. And again, this is very complicated, and I'm going to give a very kind of brief whistle-stop tour of decades of research that I have read 10% of. It's basically, when we think about influence, these are the 3 main factors. We're influenced by our social network and what that looks like. We're influenced by what we've experienced before. Oh, I went there before, it was awesome, I'm going to go again. Oh, I bought their product, it broke, I'm not buying that again. And it's how they react to their environment. A lot of behavior is driven by our cues and our environment and what happens in the environment, and we just react. I'm only going to talk about the top one today. So we often look to others when we're making decisions. This is kind of stating the obvious in many ways. To me, it's a very simple reason. If I have 4 friends, they have 4 brains. That's better than me. I have only 1 brain. All you guys only have 1 brain, right? We turn to friends to help us make decisions. And it's because we know they know more than we do. And actually, there's lots of fascinating research where people turn to friends even when the answer is obvious. Even when they already know what they should do, they turn to friends who give them terrible advice. A really good example is you're buying a car, and you've just spent weeks and months researching it. You know all the specs, you've test-driven a bunch of things, and you know what car you're going to buy. And if you go and buy a second-hand car, you bring a friend, always. Because second-hand car salesmen aren't very credible. So you bring a friend, and you're about to buy the car. And you spent all this time researching it, and your friend turns to you and says, you know, there's a guy in my work who has that car. I don't really like him. And you're like, really? And you look at the car in a different light, and you're like, you know what? It's not really me. And this is a crazy, irrational decision. You've just spent months researching it. It's definitely the right decision. Your friend's like, I wouldn't buy that car, man. Oh, okay, let's go. And this happens. This happens all the time. We turn to our friends, and they give us terrible, terrible advice. You know this is true. So our network structure impacts who we ask. Who do we bring with us to the car showroom? And it's basically these 4 things. How many connections we have, who knows whom, the strength of our relationships, and the proportion using different brands. Very simple example. A blogger is telling you to buy Adidas because Adidas went and paid him to promote their product. Very influential person. And your 2 friends are like, no way, man, Puma are way better. Adidas are kind of like last year, that's not really your style. Puma's where it's at. You're going to listen to the friends. You're going to be much more influenced by your friends than you are by the blogger. And this is important because in the last 10 years, The Tipping Point was an amazing book 10 years ago, and it flew off the shelves. But a lot of people have studied it consequently or subsequently and found out that it's not necessarily true. It's not really true that these are people in society who have overwhelming influence on the rest of us. There aren't these unique individuals who are so special that they start off cascades and start revolutions. That's not how it works at all. There are definitely people who are more influential about certain topics, but for the most part, most of our decisions are influenced by the people around us, our closest friends. The bottom diagram is how we're influenced, not the top diagram. And I think over the next 10 years, the world of marketing is going to completely shift towards thinking about the bottom diagram and not the top one. So we're heavily influenced by the people around us. There's amazing research that fascinates me about this. People who sit next to heavy eaters eat more. People who are college, this is good for any parents who have kids in college. You should know this and hunt down the studious people. College kids who room with studious roommates study more. We're influenced by the people around us, disproportionately. Another thing I think is really important for us to think about is that whether someone can be influenced is as important as the strength of the influencer. We always think about the top guy. Are they influential? We need to seed our idea. Who should we find and track? And we should need to seed their idea. They're our lead users. We need to pick those guys. We should design for those guys. They're the influencers. You don't think about the bottom bit. Are the rest of the people influenceable? So sometimes you have a situation where you have somebody who's incredibly influential, very persuasive character, very outgoing, type A person, trying to persuade you of stuff, and they're talking to a bunch of stubborn people, and they're not going to be very influential at all. And then you have other situations where you've got people who aren't influential in the traditional sense at all. They're just kind of, yeah, you should go there, buy that. And all the people they're trying to influence are sitting on the fence. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's do that. They have more influence, but they're not influential in the traditional sense. When we think about influence and think about who's more influenceable, basically people have thresholds for new ideas. They can have a high threshold or they can have a low threshold. And this is what informs those thresholds. Good and bad past experiences with a business. Bad experience, high threshold. People who have risk-averse personalities, don't like new things. Anyone who's changed their website will know this. Don't like change. Don't change that. Wasn't broken. Facebook, don't. People have deep-set habits, and deep-set habits can influence how open they are to new ideas. So our strong ties influence us the most. We're disproportionately influenced by the people that we're closest to. And this is why. Buying the car, buy this car, buy that top, looks good on you. Okay. Does anyone here have this car? Okay, good. If you do have it, you've stayed silent. I say good because I'm about to offend you if you have it. Does anyone think about the people who own this car? How many of those people bought it because Roger Federer is sitting on the bonnet? I'm guessing 0. Maybe there's some Federer stalkers. Maybe there's a couple. The reason that the guys who bought this car is because they want their neighbors to know that they're rich. That's far more influential, or that's a far bigger influencer than Roger Federer. Right? We're influenced by the people around us and how they think of us and our relationships with them. So when we think about celebrities, I don't think we should abandon celebrity endorsement or ignore it, but we should think about it in this way. Influencers or celebrities make us aware of things. You guys all know about that car because I just showed you Roger Federer sitting on the bonnet in his tennis clothes, and you're going to remember that. But they don't make us decide. They don't change behavior. Lots and lots of research has shown again and again and again that celebrities are terrible for influencing behavior. And the most obvious example of this is if celebrity endorsement did work and did change behavior, we would all be thin. So the last thing I want to talk about here is that sharing is a means to an end. So what do people talk about? If we want to think about social behavior and having people interact on our site, we need to think about what do they talk about. Well, it turns out they talk about each other. People talk about other people. 70% of conversations involve other people. And it's not all bad. We're not always bitching and complaining. Sometimes it's nice. We talk about things that surround us. There's fascinating research that shows that around Halloween, more people buy Reese's because they're orange. More people buy orange soda at Halloween because there's lots of orange in their environment. And the last thing is that we don't share facts. We share feelings. And if you look at Jonah Berger is a great researcher who's done fascinating research in the New York Times and looked at what people emailed versus what they viewed. People don't share facts. People don't share articles about Libya. They share celebrity gossip, or things that made them angry, or things that made them feel in awe, things that drove very emotional responses. So we're influenced by the people around us, mostly by our strong ties, and we talk about people, what's around us, and feelings. So very quickly, let's recap. The web has been rebuilt around people. Social behavior patterns are thousands of years old. Understand what motivates people to act. People live in networks. Networks are made up of small connected groups. The people connecting the groups are not special. We're influenced by the people around us, mostly by our strong ties. And we talk about people, what's around us, and feelings. That's a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff to think about designing around. Here's my conclusion. Here's why this is incredibly important. We live in a world of exponentially increasing information. The amount of information we have access to is going up exponentially, and it's not going to stop. So what are we going to do in this world? We can't consume all that information. We're going to turn to our friends. We're going to increase our reliance on our social networks to make decisions, because it's easier. My friends have 4 brains. I have 1 brain. Which thing should I buy? There's a million cereals in this stupid supermarket. I don't know which one to get. Oh, you get that one. I like that. OK. So information is going up, but our capacity for memory is not going to change. And it's not going to change in our lifetime. It took tens of thousands of years to evolve. It's not going to change in our lifetime. So we need to think about building in social networks. We need to think about not this top diagram, but this bottom one. If you're trying to convince somebody to rebuild their business around social, draw them that bottom diagram. That's the most impactful thing I've found in years of trying to persuade people about this. Draw that diagram. They get it. It's like, oh, my life is kind of like that. So what does this mean for you guys? In the next, I would say 2 to 5 years, entire business verticals are going to be completely disrupted by the social web. Zynga have already done it. Facebook did it with photos. Ticketmaster are trying to do it. On the left is a whole bunch of verticals that are social in nature. Entertainment, games, we play games with other people. Entertainment, we go to see shows with other people. We buy things together. Education is social, we travel with other people. And over on the right, there's a whole bunch of things that you wouldn't really consider that social, like finance and law. Is finance social? Well, it is. You want to buy a mortgage? You ask your friend, what mortgage do you have? What interest rate did you get? Oh, this thing is so complicated. I don't understand how to pay my taxes. Can you help me? Right? These are all social, and all these businesses will be disrupted. It's happened with games. That's the first leading indicator. All the examples at the start show that it's happening across a lot of verticals and a lot of different areas. Who is best positioned to help businesses make this shift? It's not CEOs. They're not even on social networks. It's not CMOs. They think that push marketing and pushing messages at people is the way to go. They grew up on Mad Men, not the show, the real-life Mad Men. TV ads. TV ads are sexy. Internet ads are not sexy. They buy TV ads. This community, the UX community, is the best positioned to influence people. Who knows more about people and social behavior than us? It's what we study. It's what we breathe. This is, to me, is this community's biggest opportunity. It's like I'm getting a bit Jerry Maguire here. It's our moment to shine. I'm serious though. This is a huge opportunity for us. A huge opportunity. We're always complaining, I want to be at the board level meeting. It's like, well, convince people to rebuild your business around people and you will be. So everyone here, almost without exception, is going to need to study and understand social behavior, at least at a fundamental level. We're social animals. Don't think about social. Think about it like electricity. Don't bolt it on. Everything we do is social, and there's no reason why the web products we build should be any different. So let's be the leaders in building products around people. Thanks.